North Korean leader Kim Jong Un has ordered his military to begin mass-producing exploding drones, according to state media. Pyongyang has been ramping up the development of new weaponry in recent years and increased arms exports to Russia. The attack drones carry explosives and crash into targets and are better at evading air defenses than missiles. Now, North Korea and Russia recently signed a major defense treaty agreeing to strengthen their military cooperation. And according to Kyiv and its allies, North Korean troops are already fighting for Russia in the war against Ukraine. Let's take a look at what that could mean for Ukraine on the battlefield and for North Korea's own relations with its neighbors.
Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian troops have been fighting to hold land they seized at the end of the summer. Now they say they're not just fighting Russian soldiers, but North Koreans as well. This footage released by Ukraine's intelligence agency appears to show North Korean soldiers receiving uniforms and equipment at a military base in the far east of Russia. Since then, Western intelligence agencies say an estimated 10,000 to 12,000 North Korean troops have traveled to the Kursk region, supporting Russian troops trying to retake the territory. North Korean soldiers could free up Russian troops that Moscow wants on the front line in eastern Ukraine. But it's unclear just how much of a difference they'll make in the war, not least because of a language barrier with their Russian counterparts. More significant may be the ripple effects of a third country sending troops into the conflict.
The first battles with North Korean soldiers mark a new chapter of global instability. Together with the world, we must do everything to ensure that this Russian step toward expanding the war, this true escalation, becomes a loss.
NATO has reacted cautiously, condemning North Korea's involvement, but falling short of proposing direct countermeasures, and warning that the two-way partnership between Russia and North Korea will have consequences beyond Ukraine.
And what we see more and more is that North Korea, Iran, China, and of course Russia are working together against Ukraine. But at the same time, Russia has to pay for this. And one of the things they are doing is delivering technology to North Korea, which is now threatening in the future the mainland of the US, continental Europe, but also our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Japan, for example, and the Republic of Korea.
Indeed, South Korea is intensely worried about its northern neighbor's move. The North's army is massive, 1.2 million soldiers, and regularly provokes South Korea with missile tests and border confrontations. South Koreans worry that the North will gain valuable combat experience in Russia and possibly in Ukraine itself. The North is also testing its military equipment against Western systems. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said his country could review the possibility of sending military aid to Ukraine, pouring yet more weapons into the conflict. The wild card is the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has praised both North Korea's Kim Jong Un and Russia's Vladimir Putin. Trump takes office on the 20th of January, a waiting game where everything is on the line for Ukraine.
Alexander Lipke is the Asia Program Coordinator at the European Council on Foreign Relations and joins us now from Berlin. Alexander, welcome to DW. Now, President Zelenskyy, in that report we just saw, called North Korea's involvement a major escalation. Do you share this assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when thinking about the significance of this move, it is important to, Zelenskyy has said it, to not look at the kind of military impact directly, but at the symbolic character this has for this conflict and the symbolic character of the escalation has for this conflict. And what it essentially does is it takes this bilateral conflict between two European nations and that have been supported, of course, by allies on both sides, with weaponry and ammunition. And it takes this and it escalates this into a regional conflict, which opens up a lot more avenues for escalation in the future. And maybe the most stark reminder, this is the most stark reminder for Europeans yet of the interconnections between security in Asia on the one hand, on the Korean Peninsula, and kind of direct security impacts on the other hand in Europe.
We'll get to those in a second, but first I want to ask you about how South Korea has been reacting to all of this. They've been urging for an immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops from the conflict, talking about their own security concerns. Why is Seoul specifically so worried about this?
Seoul's main concern basically addresses the delivery of advanced military technology to North Korea, and of course what this means for stability on the Korean Peninsula. So we know that North Korea and Pyongyang are getting money, they're getting food aid. So this, on the one hand, props up the North Korean regime. It basically throws a lifeline to the North Korean regime to foster stability on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, it allows the North Korean regime to, in the worst case, accelerate its its nuclear weapons program and its ballistic missile program. And this, of course, then changes completely the calculations on the Korean Peninsula in terms of the speed of escalation. And on top of that, Seoul is very, of course, worried about a potential Russian involvement in a conflict on the Korean Peninsula. Yeah. So overall, I think the escalation potential has never been this high, at least in decades, as it is at the moment.
All right. Talking about technology, Kim Jong Un has just ordered the mass production of exploding drones, suicide drones as they're called. To what extent do you think this could be linked to his increased cooperation with Vladimir Putin?
I think it's absolutely linked. I think it shows there's a learning on the North Korean side from the war in Ukraine, where these kind of drones have been extremely important. It remains to be seen how maybe even Russian technology will support North Korea in being able to produce these drones. And of course, the worry is that a North Korea that is able to mass produce these kinds of weapons that are so important on the Ukrainian battlefield will, and sends them to Putin and to Russia, will allow Putin to prolong this war, to sit out this war even longer and prevail in the end. So again, this is a stark reminder how such news of North Korean weapon development has become so relevant for us here in Europe.
Yeah, I want to get back to what you touched on there at the beginning. You recently wrote that maybe for the first time, Asian nations are seeking to shape the European security order. What does that mean for Europe?
I mean, for Europe, that means that we need to change the scope of how we think about the conflict in Ukraine, but also how we think about cooperation with basically our partners in Asia. As the security environment in Asia becomes so important to us, we need to step up cooperation, for example, with South Korea in terms of intelligence sharing. They have been at the forefront of breaking news about the North Korean deployment in Russia. Mm-hmm. So this is one important avenue, and a second one, of course, is the industrial military cooperation with South Korea, who have a well-functioning military industrial complex. And as Europe braces to beef up its deterrence, South Korea can play a complementary role in helping us to get where we want to be in terms of our defense posture as quickly as possible.
That was Alexander Lipke from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Fascinating insights. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's bring in Gustav Gressel. He's a senior policy fellow at the wider Europe program at the European Council of Foreign Relations here in Berlin. Gustav, how much do you think Russia is relying on North Korea's support in its war in Ukraine?
Well, they're predominantly relying on North Korean artillery ammunition, and that has been going on for at least a year. But of course, North Korea has increasingly ramped up the support for the Russian armed forces. Now we see drones. We saw the supply of artillery systems and artillery spare barrels before. And yeah, North Korea lends out soldiers. I mean, Technically, it's not a new practice. North Korea lended out forced labor to both Russia and China to work in cheap sectors of the economy, and the North Korean regime gets much of the remittance these people send home. Now, with the high salary Russia promises to its soldiers, this is, of course, a lucrative business, so I would guess this would continue. So far, of course, the use of North Korean soldiers has been limited to few parts of the front line in Kursk Oblast. The key issue for the Russians, of course, is if you introduce a contingent of a foreign army with a different language, you have to provide at least a minimum coordination, and that is seems to be the bottleneck for the use right now.
Do you think it will make a real difference to strengthen Russia's position in Ukraine?
It might. So to put things in perspective, the Russian army needs to recruit 30,000 new soldiers per month to keep up with losses. That's a staggering number. The problem for Russia, of course, is that those who are willing to fight and die for money, most have already signed up, and even if Russia increases the salaries for soldiers and the bonuses they get when signing up, and they have increased that over the current year quite significantly, those who do not want to fight for money still don't want to fight for money, even though it's more. But of course, North Korea, they can command over a lot of people, and the North Korean state desperately needs foreign currency income. So this is a match, and with Russia's increasing problem finding new soldiers and meeting domestic recruitment quotas, I think this will continue and at least provide Putin with a bit longer lifeline and soldiers to use in the war.
Now, let's zoom out a bit. Russia has other partnerships with autocratic states beyond North Korea, and those include China and Iran. Beyond military cooperation, how important are these relationships?
Well, the relationship with China is crucial for the Russian economy. They have been hit by sanctions, have been cut off from most of the financial markets. The Chinese automobile sector particularly now makes an inroad to Russia. Chinese get access to raw materials, etc. So that is an economic lifeline. Iran has been a partner for specialized military equipment, drones, electronic warfare systems, radars. Here also, the same with North Korea, the clandestine partnership with Iran has been going on for quite some time. And now it's more in the open. They celebrate that they're together. For Iran also having a confrontation with Israel, they want to have a lifeline and security support, and of course here the interests of both parties match.
Now, is there any one action that you would recommend for Europe and the West to counter Russia's strategic alliances right now?
Well, the problem is our hub, or the Western hub for strategic alliances, was the US, who had both aligned to Asia-Pacific countries and then, of course, within NATO to Europe. And there's a big question mark on the US position. But, of course, Europeans, especially in Germany, should rethink their policy of restraint, because it has not led to a restraint on the other side. And a more forceful policy and actually sort of punishing Russia with either renewed sanctions or more military deliveries to Ukraine for its outreach policy might actually be the better choice, because otherwise we see that North Korea and Iran basically for free support Russia, get rewarded for that by Russia, but do not get any sort of negative reaction beyond condemnation from the West.
What about the long term then? What else could the West and what else could Europe do?
Well, in Europe, we actually have both the finances and the production capability in terms of military equipment to keep Ukraine in the fight. If we would have activated or increased our military production when the war started. Now the problem is that we grapple with the issue that this is a long war of attrition. And we would need to have increased our defense production in terms of armored vehicles, in terms of air defense systems, etc. And we have for a very long time not done so. We still can play catch up if we want to, but of course this requires decisions in our capitals. In Germany, we have elections. France is struggling with its finances. It doesn't look very good, but it's still theoretically possible to catch up.
Gustav Gressel there, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you very much.